Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. It's been the better part of a year since the first round of tariffs went into effect, and while some have been scaled back, others have been ramped up in the ongoing international trade war. So how are the tariffs working? Dr. Elliot Parker of the UNR Economics Department is here with me to talk about that. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you so much, Ariana.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. And the last time you were here, we were talking tariffs kind of right after they'd been implemented. And at that point, it was too soon to really see how they'd shape up. Now, several months past that, what are we seeing from the tariffs?
Yeah, so what we would have expected is that it would have taken time anyways, even if it had been a simple on-off switch where we turn tariffs on. And as you know, tariffs are a tax on imports. They're paid for by the American firms that are doing the importing, and we would expect those tariffs to be passed on to the consumer. The consumer is not always the households. It can be, say, a firm that needs to buy steel in order to produce, say, something like beer kegs, one of my favorite examples. And so even if that had been how it happened, a simple flip of the switch, we'd have expected it to take 6 months or more because contracts are made far in advance. There's a lot going on. But one of the things we saw was that firms saw it coming. And so they started building up very large inventories of goods before the tariffs went on. The second thing is those tariffs went on, and then they went off, and then they went on again, then they went off again. And different countries had different tariffs for different periods of time. And so firms would often wait until the way would go off and then go on, and then they would import the goods. And so it's been very haphazard in terms of what those tariffs are. Now, the other thing is we don't actually have data since August, right? So because of the government shutdown, we're not receiving data, so we haven't really seen what's happened to our imports since then. But still, we were expecting that we would, by the end of the year, we'd start to see some effects. So putting that in context, let's say it goes through, of course those tariffs kept changing. You know, some would be like 50% or 80% or 100%. But as of August, the average tariff that was being paid was roughly 20% of imports. And that sounds like a lot, but if you realize we only import 10% of our GDP. So if you take 20% increase in import cost, multiply it by 10% of our GDP, we should expect to see prices rise by about 2% more. And of course they go up, and they shouldn't continue to go up, right? Inflation doesn't work that way. It's not like the prices always keep going up, or it's not like the prices go up and come down. This one effect would be a temporary effect on prices. So we've been kind of surprised at how slow imports have been to respond, right? We haven't, and we've also been surprised by how some of the prices haven't increased as much as we might have expected yet. And that's an interesting thing, because what we're watching is firms are waiting. There were a number of firms that started off wanting to put a tariff surcharge on. I don't know if you remember, but Amazon talked about doing this.
Yeah.
And they got criticized by the president on national TV. And so they kind of pulled back. Now, of course, they need to figure out a way to pass those costs on to the consumer. Some of them are waiting to see, well, are we going in recession? We don't want to increase prices and then have to decrease them when people stop buying things because they're out of jobs. Some of them are waiting for other firms to take the first step. And so there's a little bit of waiting. There's even some firms who think the Supreme Court is going to say that these tariffs are unconstitutional, in which case the federal government will be required to give them refunds on the tariffs they've paid. And if that happens, of course, they really don't want to be in the position of raising their prices for consumers, only to now back that out. So, so we haven't seen as big of a push as we might have expected. Certainly if you buy coffee, you should have noticed that the price of coffee has gone up significantly. There's a number of other goods, things we do import from other countries, that the prices have risen. But overall, the big picture isn't that we haven't seen some dramatic spike in inflation. As far as costing jobs, generally what we would expect is that imports would create some jobs, cost other jobs. The real effect of rising tariffs would be slower growth over time. And the current projections for economic growth have fallen. They were close to about, say, 2.8% is what was expected for 2025-26. And the projection through 2026 is now maybe half that. So we're expecting slower growth. But that assumes that tariffs are the only thing going on. And there's a lot of other things going on at the same time.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. It kind of feels almost like this breath holding of like, is the situation going to change? Nobody wants to make any dramatic, adjustments to their business model in case tomorrow it's no longer called for.
And that's a really good point, because that's then feeding back on the overall economy. One thing that you're noticing is that firms aren't hiring very much, right? The number of job openings is not increasing rapidly as much as we might expect. The percentage relative to population, the number of people being hired is significantly down from last year. And why is that, right? We don't also have any big layoffs. There's not a lot of people losing their jobs right now outside of, say, the federal government. And you put those together, and what we think is that firms are just in a wait and see mode. They don't know if these tariffs will continue. They don't know what the rates will be next week, because they keep changing. Consider what happened regarding the tariffs on Canada because of the commercial showing Ronald Reagan being anti-tariffs. He believed in using tariffs very sparingly, not like we're seeing now. And so the president got mad about that and threatened higher tariffs. You see that going, and a week from now they may not be there. And so if you're a firm trying to do business in this environment, do you invest, right? If you're saying, well, I want to build a plant to produce a good that is currently being produced by foreign firms, and we can produce it here, do you actually make that investment if you don't know if the tariffs will be there in 6 months? And so what we're seeing is kind of a wait and see economy. We're seeing the hurricane hit Jamaica. I was talking with my wife about whether it's a little bit like that moment in Key Largo when the air gets silent and the sun comes out and you think, okay, has this passed us by, or are we in the eye of the hurricane?
So we don't know.
We don't know. We're waiting to see.
How long can this kind of instability, the not knowing, the holding our breath and waiting to see, how long can we sustain that before you just have to at some point make some decisions?
Well, I would say that if that were the only thing going on, we would probably be teetering on the edge of a recession. Just the uncertainty alone, not the tariffs, right? Like I said, that's different if it's an on and off switch. I don't think tariffs are good for growth, but I don't think that would cause this waiting, because if firms were all holding off, not wanting to invest, not wanting to hire, then I think that would be pushing us into recession. But at the same time, we've got this big AI bubble. There's a lot of money going into the stock market that is really for purposes of building data centers and buying chips in order to stock these data centers. There's a lot going on. There's estimates that 80% of the increase in the stock market this year is driven essentially by AI investment. And there's a lot of enthusiasm in that. And so that is happening at the same time, and that keeps the overall economy growing. But it's growing in narrow areas.
That's interesting. You called it a bubble. What makes you think that it's a bubble?
Okay, I don't know. So I should be careful. Because you never really know for sure if things are a bubble until after they pop. But the reason I suspect it's a bubble is because, as far as I have figured out, and I'm not saying AI is not real, but they haven't figured out any sort of profit generating model that I can see. Many people are using it like a glorified Google search. So now, you go to a search engine like Google and it uses AI to answer questions, and you ask questions, and it's like a glorified version of that. But that's the free version, right? You don't make money off that. If you're Google, you make money off of the advertising that goes with it, or the collection of information, what you're interested in, so they can resell your data in order to market products to you. But then basically we're back to like what social media works. Now, social media has grown. I mean, it makes a lot of money, but it makes a lot of that off of marketing, right? The idea is to sell you things, but they're not selling the AI, they're selling you other things. So how do they make the profit for AI? Is it just basically social media squared, or is there actually a profit model in there that will pay back these huge investments that are going into all these data centers?
I wonder too if some of it, could also head in the other direction of the practical applications of AI, not just as you mentioned, like a high-powered Google, but literally to replace certain elements of the workforce. And we've seen this implemented even in my industry, of just like literal jobs that used to require a human being to do, and now you have AI. Like, for example, AI is running the teleprompter at the moment. Not that we're using it, but so just a thought. There's a lot of applications that I think people are concerned about it replacing jobs. The concern I see there is that then, so yes, maybe we have this increase in the money that sector is making, but then do we have a decrease in employment because of it, which would then offset the benefits?
Yeah, but that's not going to happen immediately. I mean, I think it is part of the reason firms might also be hesitant about hiring, but they're not yet laying people off in large numbers to be replaced by AI. We haven't seen that yet. But it is a concern. I mean, this is, if you start thinking about these things, you start having a lot of sleepless nights to know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think anytime you spend thinking about the economy too hard,
Yeah.
you might have some sleepless
Well,
nights.
if you go back in time and look at technology over time, there's always this tension, this struggle. Technology and over the years, capital investment has often been used to try to replace labor, right? And this goes back 1,000 years at least. So is this another version of that same story, or is this somehow going to be fundamentally different? I think I would feel a little more threatened if I thought that the AI models I've seen were better at being truthful. But at this point, the stories I'm hearing is there's too many hallucinations going on. There's some good things that robotics can do, some amazing things that it can do. But in terms of the AI part of it, not just the robotics part of it, they're getting a lot of their information from places like Reddit,
Yeah.
right?
Or making it up entirely.
Making up entirely. And there are legal cases where the courts have tried to look up the cases that are being cited by attorneys who are filing briefs, and they find that they don't exist.
Oh, those are hilarious, especially when it comes out of lawyers.
But who
I
wants
mean,
to,
really.
Right, but who wants to fly a plane designed by, a software that hallucinates?
Yeah, the trust factor is an issue, and I think that you're right. It's definitely going to slow down the implementation.
So those are the two things that happen. That that one is the downside. We're all enthusiastic about it, but is there a danger that it's not actually even built on anything that's accurate? It's too eager to please in some ways. And then the second part of that is, what's the profit model? Where are they going to make the money?
Yeah.
Is it just selling us things at higher prices, but they've got to sell us something, right? And that's the question. So when I throw the word bubble around, I probably should be more careful because I don't know. I mean, maybe there are vast fortunes, but I am expecting that there will be a lot of consolidation in the market after a few years.
Okay.
There's going to be a few survivors ultimately, who are trying to find a way to make profit out of it.
And should that bubble pop, we would see a pretty dramatic shift in the rosy picture of the economy in some of the indicators now.
Yeah, we've seen bubbles pop before. We saw a bubble pop. There was a tech bubble back in the 1990s, and it popped around 2000, 2001, right after the Y2K
Right.
issue. And, that was a case where it caused a recession, but the recession wasn't that deep, right? It was mostly a retrenchment in investment for a couple of years. And it mostly hurt people who were all caught up in the tech bubble. Then we had the housing bubble crash, 2006, 2007, and then, 2008 we go off the cliff. That hurt a lot more people because a huge number of the population had their wealth built up, in their housing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, we are over time for our break, so sit tight. We're gonna come back here. I'll be back with Dr. Elliot Parker to talk more about what to expect out of the economy heading into 2026. Stay with us.